date here. I will call the July 17th EDA meeting to order.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, approve the June 2023 EDA minutes. Any comments, changes, etc.?
I'll make a motion to approve as submitted.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Item number 4, the BR&E program update discussion.
Thank you, Julie. The East Bethel EDA has been discussing the need for and means to update the current BR&E program. As this plan was adopted in 2016, the plan needs a review and potential update to reflect the new challenges faced by small businesses in the post-pandemic culture and the evolving business climate environment as exists in 2023. Christine Costello, our Community Economic Development Representative for Connexus Energy, attended our April 17th EDA meeting and reviewed the services Connexus provide through their economic development programs and discussed what they may be able to offer in the update of our BR&E program. Christine is with us tonight for tonight's meeting to continue this discussion. The EDA also met with Michael Darger of the University of Minnesota Extension Service and one of the primary authors of the current BR&E plan with the EDA at the May 15, 2023 meeting to provide a review of potential updates and or direction to the plan. Staff also met with the East Bethel Chamber of Commerce at their May 11, 2023 meeting and updated the Chamber on the EDA's initiative to revisit our current BR&E program and requested their participation going forward with the update. Staff has had 2 follow-up meetings with the Chamber along with email communications to determine their interest in partnering in the update. Their involvement is critical to moving forward on any direction of this program. Representatives from the Chamber indicated that they would be attending tonight's meeting, but we were informed at 4:30 p.m. that the Chamber members would not be able to attend the meeting, but they would send us a letter expressing their support for the program and their intent to partner with the EDA on the update. The summary and discussion of the last meeting was acknowledgement of and the need for the fact that we are a different city now than at the time of the original BR&E, with a utility system that has emerged from its infancy to one that is now self-sustaining relative to operational cost and has become our most valuable asset in terms of being able to service new development in the corridor. We have a section here that lists the following businesses that have located in East Bethel since 2016, the following expansions that have occurred in East Bethel since 2016, and the major businesses that have changed ownership since that time. At this time, staff requests the EDA continue the discussion of the BR&E update as to its goals, the availability of resources needed to complete the project, and implement its recommendations. This time I'll turn it over to Julie and Christine to go over some of the discussions that they've had and see what we can do to outline some of these things and give us direction on how we're going forward with the program.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, Christine Costello and I from Connexus had a chance to connect. I thought, just to give her a heads up of what the discussion would be like this evening, I thought her input would be invaluable since she's gone through this twice with a slightly different methodology when you were with the city. So if you'd like to come up and...
Thank you, members of the EDA. I appreciate it. So I had a chance to talk with Julie earlier today. My previous experiences in local government, I worked with the city of Cottage Grove for 6 years as their economic development director and then their community development director. So I initiated their BR&E process there. So I shared with Julie a little bit what we did there. We did the original survey with the University of Minnesota Extension as our first one. And then we continued the following 2 years. We did every other year. We did it on our own. And I kind of shared with her, we took that original survey and pared it down a little bit because it's a lot of questions. And for Cottage Grove, we did it industry-wise. So one year we focused on industrial, and then the next year we focused on commercial, every other year. So Julie and I discussed, based on the list of 28 businesses roughly that are in the staff report, you could base it off of that. New businesses, so it's kind of up to the EDA and city how they wanted to proceed, but kind of here to answer any questions, and told Julie and Jack I'm happy to participate in the interview process and interviewing businesses, and I think it's great that the chamber will participate. That's a huge aspect of it. They have those connections with the businesses, and if they're willing to, one of their businesses maybe as part of the process. And I shared a letter with Jack that we had the mayor send out to our businesses that showed the support of the city. Just wanted to provide examples of my experience for Jack to have. So here for questions.
In your experience doing this before, were home-based businesses ever included?
We did not include home-based businesses. Home occupations were always, they're really hard to track. They don't require a permit. They could have pulled a building permit to do electrical or minor, building work, adding a wall or something like that. But they're too hard to judge in terms of whether or not they're operating. Oftentimes home occupations are really good about coming to the city if there's a need to expand, because they'll have questions on the process of, do you know of any space available? So that was just too in the weeds for us to go into somebody's home and interview them for their business, so we stayed away from those.
I believe East Bethel does have a permitting process, at least for businesses that come forward. So I think as far as trying to track them down, that'd be fairly easy. Do you think it would be worth it to, say, at least email out a survey and just based right on home-based businesses and see if we can get responses, if that would add to any of this business retention? Or I suppose the key part would be expansion, if we can expand a home-based business into a larger.
It's an option. I think it's the EDA deciding kind of what they want your focus to be for your BR&E. Whether it's kind of a cross-section of the businesses listed in the staff report, or if you want to go industry specific. You could send out a letter to home-based businesses and ask them if they're interested in participating, or it's just sending a letter out to home-based businesses and letting them know if they have an interest in expanding their business to a retail space within the community. Here's the contact information for the community development director, and they can, kind of walk them through the steps if they need to get any building permits, kind of thing. So you could kind of do it either or. I think it's based on what the EDA would prefer to do.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
With
Any other
the discussions on the home-based businesses, if we want to do this, I think it should be a separate portion. I think it's gonna be hard to integrate the two. I think we currently have about 60 interim use permits issued, but we probably have 300 or 400 home-based businesses in East Bethel, maybe even more than that. But I think it might be good, just if nothing else, those that we do have on record is to send them a letter stating what some of our objectives are on this and asking them for some of their input and letting them know they can contact us if they need any assistance for expansion or anything else in the operation of their business.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought, that not to include them in the full survey, but maybe a similar fashion to the communication survey that we just had, where it's say 10 basic questions and this is how we can help. So there's at least some feedback, and if we can help motivate some home-based businesses into the retail space. It's good for the business and good for East Bethel.
Or just let them be heard. I think, Kevin, we were talking last time about it, this is about communication and just connecting with our businesses. And if we can do this kind of the non-traditional way rather than going through the U of M, if we can gather enough volunteers and really let our businesses be heard, that's kind of what I was thinking. But we just need to figure out what the scope is, what the questions are, who's on the team, what's the timing. You know, it's a big undertaking.
They could be a valuable asset in volunteers too.
Right. We've got chamber, we've got planning commission, we've got, we've got a lot of us that are all volunteer civic people already, so.
Yeah.
Christine, could you tell us a little bit about when you would do the portions every other year in-house? What were the staff needs and time requirements approximately to
Sure.
complete those?
It is a bit staff heavy. Oftentimes we would have an summer intern help with the calling, or if an administrative staff member wasn't busy, if they could help calling. But we started out with a letter from the mayor saying that we were undertaking what the BR&E is, kind of explain it a little bit. Then we reach out to the businesses, ask if they would be willing to participate, letting them know, you know, we want to hear the positives and the negatives that they may have. Sometimes it would take a couple phone calls. If we had their email, we would send an email as well. So it is intensive in terms of, you know, they're busy running their business, so connecting with the business, but we used an intern to kind of help so staff could continue their work, but had an intern or administrative staff when they weren't busy, assist staff. But I'd split the list with fellow staff members and we'd have our list to call and just keep pounding.
Okay.
So
How about like volunteers? Would you have volunteers? from
we
the
had
chamber?
volunteers. Our chamber was really great and willing to help. The county economic development director was willing to help, and I told Julie and Jack earlier that I strong-armed him a little bit. No, he was more than willing to participate. So I know he and I are willing to help. Jack, consider reaching out to Greater MSP. I know they're a bit short-staffed, but they're, you know, might be an organization like that. But the chamber was really, as well as the EDA, willing to help. Council went on a few of those interviews, but staff also did the interviews too. Most were in person. We had a couple that were just, I'm too busy, I don't want to meet. So we would send them the survey and they return it back to us. But we really preferred that in-person meeting. I think you get more out of it. And then it was, for staff, a great chance to see how the business operates and learn about the industries in the community.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned you might be willing to share your questionnaire
Yes.
from a second time, because I think that's what we need to figure out. What are the scope of the questions and
So
what are we looking to find out?
Right. So I sent to Jack the survey we did from 2018 and 2020, as well as a sample template of the letter we used from the mayor. And then I also included, there are some results of kind of when we did those interviews, what we compiled, what we heard, you know, we would hear workforce, internet connection, things like that, or code enforcement issues. So then we could take those major concerns that we heard, and that kind of became our work plan for economic development, items we tried to work on then throughout the year. So it looks lengthy. The questions, you know, go fairly quickly in terms of, is it a branch? How many employees? It's kind of all up to what kind of questions you want to ask and details you want to get. How many full-time employees? What's your pay range? Did you start in the community or elsewhere? And then the one from 2020 had a couple questions about COVID. There's some open-ended questions about, what do you see as the community's weakness? What are their positives? So I would say, I think it's about 6 pages, but it does go fairly quickly. We would always do a team of 2 one person kind of doing the talking and one kind of taking the notes. And then we take the answers and then put them in the computer on a spreadsheet.
So you did them in person with hard copy, not SurveyMonkey emailed?
Yep, we did hard copy, yeah. We would send the survey in advance to the business so they could get a feel for the type of questions we were asking, so they weren't feel like they were being surprised or caught off guard. And then we would, do the handwritten face-to-face. I felt like we got more out of it, and they were willing to be more open with us.
How many businesses would you typically visit on these biannual?
The very first time, like you, we had a big group, 40 plus, and then from there it would drop down to 20.
Okay.
We would shoot for, and sometimes we would get, I can't, won't do it. So our pool would get smaller, and maybe it was only 10 to 15. But for me, I took it as a way, any kind of information I could get or update on the business community, I took that as a win. So I kind of knew what I needed to do at the city level for economic development for my community.
And Jack, remind me how many, the list that you came up with, how many businesses were you counting?
About 120.
Okay. So I mean, since it's been since 2016.
Yeah, that list was last updated in 2018, so I'm sure there's several others on there and several of them that are on there that are no longer in business or moved on. So, but it is a good base to start with, along with the Chamber's directory, and I think that gives a good list of ones that we can start to focus on.
And I should have looked back on the list, but if I recall, did we interview, Brian, do you remember? Was it like 40?
43, I believe.
43, okay,
Yeah.
43 companies.
And you guys did it in person, hard copy,
Yep.
which I think is the way to go. I think
I do too.
I think it could be possible to do it in a group environment for some of the chamber people, especially those who are volunteers, get them all together like at their breakfast and pass it out and then meet with them to discuss it, let them fill it out there. And especially those who are going to be the volunteers that are going to help. And then from there go scatter.
Yeah.
But I think that would save a lot of time because the chamber when they have their breakfasts, that's when they get over half the businesses, I think.
Right.
They're crowded. The 7, 8 o'clock in the morning ones are busy. The 4 o'clock in the afternoon ones, we get 10, maybe 15 people. I don't know how many, I didn't make the Garfish one, but
I'd
Yeah,
say
there's about 15 people there.
I was going to
Yeah.
say 20, 15
Yeah.
to 20. It was better attended,
yeah.
yeah.
So, but the mornings, the breakfast, that's the big one. That's the one where we need to be.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's where you can recruit some volunteers. I look
Recruit
at-
volunteers, yeah.
But we also had a lot of people that were on the interviewing committee that weren't members of the EDA or the chamber. I mean, there were people that I knew from, my life, my time in the
Right.
community that just came out.
And how did they find out about it? For your conversation, or was it published in the newsletter and
think it
a
was
call
published in the
meet
newsletter.
here one
Yeah.
evening or one afternoon or something?
I'm not sure exactly how they reached out to everybody, but the ones, I think they tried to send a notification to all the businesses to see which ones responded, which one would really accept an interview. And there were multiple means. The newsletter was one form, the website, Channel 10, and then a written letter, I think, to each one of those that they had an address for.
Yeah, because now even for those who are, I'm too busy, well, some of us could do evening after hours Zoom calls with them,
Right.
We didn't have that so much back in 2018.
Mm-hmm. Right. That adds a whole new dimension.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So is this a good idea? Is this, I mean, depending on the scope, and do we want to keep exploring this? I don't know that we're going to get anything figured out tonight, but do we want to continue the discussion, I think is the
Well, I
question.
think we can continue it, but I also think we still have a lot of data. And I think the new data, even though we have new businesses, I think it's gonna all be kind of the same, but maybe ranked a little bit different. That's my opinion. Unless we have, and they might have some new ideas to put on there and, you know, where we put comments. I think we should absolutely pursue this, but I also think we got something to work on that in the meantime. Some of their
Christine?
old concerns, sorry.
Excuse me. Christine, when you did this for Cottage Grove, did you involve the University of Minnesota in your efforts, or did you just do it totally in-house?
The very first time we did it with the University of Minnesota. And so we thought that was important because the community had never done one before, to kind of lay the groundwork of what it was. And then, so some of the volunteers from that initial survey were willing to be volunteers again and do interviews with businesses. So they're like, yeah, I like this process. So they would kind of trickle along. But then the preceding 2 years, we did it in-house.
And I think if we're gonna follow that pattern and do this on a more frequent basis, maybe it's time we looked at doing this one kind of on our own. We've already had the BRNE experience with the U. We kind of know where we're going with this. I think it's just a matter of getting the surveys and shaping the questions and then getting it organized to have that done.
Jack, do we have the paper copies of the old interviews?
I would have to get up with Doug Welter on that. I do not have them, but I'm sure they're around here somewhere.
I'd be curious because, I mean, most of the interviews that I did were within my industry. And I'd be very curious. Number one, I think that if you've interviewed them before, you should look at what their answers were, and you should go back and interview them again. You know, you can have a certain level
Right.
of relating at the time, and you know, I'd be very curious if we could find, if you could find that out.
Okay.
And then, to me, that's one of the things we should structure is, I'm not gonna cite the business by name, but one of the businesses, but I have talked about it before, they said they had a problem finding help. Okay, and they were looking for, they could get help that had skill in one part of their business, but they didn't have the skills that they needed for the other part. And we gave them some suggestions to then see if they were able to find that type of.
We had that exact same issue with a lot of our businesses in our industrial park in Cottage Grove. So that's why we had the county staff person, because then they could connect them with the county workforce development group. And, you know, here's where you can advertise your positions, or there's the technical colleges. So
That's
Right.
it all starts to weave
That's
together.
exactly what we did in St. Francis High School, and,
Yep.
you know,
Tech, Onoka Tech, and, yeah.
And you'll probably still hear that again. That's still definitely an issue that you're hearing from.
Probably more
businesses.
so.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, I don't think it's the data points that are so important, because we know they're probably gonna end up being, it's gonna be broadband and employment, and, you know, there might be some other things that come up, but it's the process and talking to people and really hearing the individual comments.
And if you're looking for like statistical information, Jack can reach out to DEED. Tim O'Neill's the labor analyst for the 7-county metro region. And he can pull data left and right that he has access to, and it's amazing what he can do with all those labor statistics. So if you're looking for general labor information, he can definitely get it down to county, and he can sometimes get it down to the city level. So he's a good resource for that kind of general data if you want that as well.
Well, in moving forward with the discussions, and I think it's a good place to kind of kick it off, as Suzanne mentioned, at the Chamber's October breakfast meeting. That would give us at least 2 meetings to come up with something to propose to them. At our next meeting, we can kind of provide an outline for discussion on how we want to proceed with this. And at your direction, I'll kind of develop a rough one, and I will consult with Christine to see if she has any edits, modifications, suggestions for improvements. And we can bring that back and have that discussion to see if this is what we want to use, and then we can have another month to refine it and then roll it out in October, at least for discussion with the chamber.
Sure.
I think that sounds like a good plan, Jack. I'm not opposed to the idea of doing the next study on our own. I'm all for saving money and being economical in doing this. I just want to be very clear-sighted about what this is going to take, and that's, my question. I would hate for us to get to the point in October and kick it to the chamber and they say, well, how are you going to get it done? I'm like, well, we expect you guys to help out with it. I mean, that's just not going to go over well. We need to have a strong project plan with real deadlines and real timelines and commitments of when it's going to take.
And in the interim, we'll still go to the chamber meetings to try to finalize what they can do, what people are willing to help out with, so we'll have a better idea of what their participation level can be.
So another thought might be to Tom saying, if with the last one we had leadership positions that kind of headed it up, there's I think 5 main ones, and then there's 10 other ones that followed them up. If we could at least put some leadership in place, maybe, or if we can brainstorm and maybe talk to some people and at least get that part involved, that get some commitment from a couple people, so that we can, when I go out of the chamber, we can at least say, we have these people involved, they're heading it up, and if they're chamber members, that might even be a lot better.
Yeah, I think we gotta have it, we have to have an outline of how we're gonna,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we could get some, at least the leadership team informally put together, I think that would be,
That's a good first step.
yeah.
Christine, did you put together any process documents when you went through this?
I'm gonna have to look.
Okay.
I know I pulled the files and they're all public, so I will check and see if I have those. And anything I have, I'll gladly share with Jack.
That would be great. I
yeah.
think just anything that we can use and adapt to our own use. So we're
Absolutely.
not recreating the wheel, just so we can share with people what it is we're doing and what the process is and what the time is.
And not that where I did it was perfect by any means, so if there's another community that is of interest, I'm happy unless Jack wants to reach out to them. Most of that information is public in terms
Okay.
of the surveys that were filled out, probably not. But if there's somebody else's format that you like, I'm happy to reach out to contacts I have too.
Well, we would appreciate anything you can provide us as a guide and a starting point. You've done it both ways, so you have experience in both of them. And we value that, and I think that's what we're looking for in this instance.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to help in any way. It's tedious in terms of getting the businesses together. They're busy operating their business, rightfully so. But I think it's such great information and valuable for the city to have, to know what direction and what the focus from an economic development standpoint. So happy to help in any way.
Any other comments or questions? Well, we appreciate the opportunity to leverage you and your past experience. That's great.
Absolutely. I like this stuff, so
Good.
happy to help.
All right, you're on board.
Thank you.
Okay, then, so at the next meeting, we'll have a little more defined outline to start discussing how we want to proceed on this, and then tweak that and try to get something more formal in September, and have a goal at least to make some type of presentation with and/or before the chamber at their October meeting. Is that what I understand?
So I think if we can outline the process. Maybe we use our networks to talk to key leaders, people who could be a leader. Reach out to chamber people that we know.
We
I
could
know.
look at who led last time and
Right,
touch base with them
Right.
right off the bat, and
and then look at I guess that's high level, and then when we get more in the weeds, we need to figure out what are the questions, what's the scope of the businesses, do we try to do everyone, do we count, do we do people with 5 employees or more, or, if you're able to get that information, that might be helpful too, Jack. Any other comments or thoughts or things that would be helpful?
Well, the only thing I was thinking is at the October meeting, and you guys can correct me if you think I'm rushing it, but I think we should actually have a sign-up sheet to pass out for people who are willing to participate and how many hours a day or what their time frame availability would be. Because
I don't think you're rushing it. I think.
Nope.
that-
And I think
No.
we should have those conversations before the meeting too, just so people anticipate. It's like that we are asking for
yeah,
help.
Yeah, we gotta give them a heads up.
right, yeah. So
Yeah.
because everybody processes different.
I know.
And that's one thing we will work with the chamber to get that done and make that one of their hopefully they'll volunteer to have that be their first assignment. And let them know at least this is gonna be discussed at that meeting and, prepare some information for them, or we can help get them some information and, get them prepped for that meeting.
Sounds good. We're getting there.
So I would like to know how the meeting at the chamber board went. They all were they, because you went to the board meeting, right?
I went to their board meeting on June the 30th,
Right.
and then I went to the meeting at Garfish. On June the 30th, they were very interested in continuing the program. They couldn't give us any commitment on who would be here at this meeting, because I invited them to the meeting. At the Garfish meeting, they said they would have a couple people there, but apparently they had some things come up on their schedules that they couldn't make it tonight. But I did get a call this afternoon, and they said they were very interested in continuing the program. They supported the program, and their intent was to partner with us to make something happen. So we'll go to their next meeting, which I'll have to check and see when that is. It'll probably be the end of this month, but we'll go back to their board meeting and tell them what has happened here so far, and work on getting some commitments and some names of people, and let them know what our discussion is so they can start getting ready for that October meeting also.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else? And I was thinking, depending on the progress, there may be a need for just a work session between now and October, but let's think about that. Okay. All right. Let's go to item number 5, Capstone Viking Meadows Concept Plan.
Concept plan for a 350 single-family home residential community for the Viking Meadows Golf Course property was presented to the Planning Commission as a mixed-use PUD for review at their June 27th, 2023 meeting. The concept proposal was presented by Capstone Homes of Ramsey, Minnesota. The site is located at 1788 Viking Boulevard Northeast and covers approximately 160 acres, of which 115 are developable. I'm sure you're all familiar, this is the property that's owned by Viking Meadows Golf Course. This property, they've marketed now for several years. They had a potential buyer a little over a year ago, but for some reasons, a purchase agreement was signed, but there were certain conditions that weren't satisfied, and that sale fell through. In the interim, Capstone Homes developed an interest in the property. They have also signed a purchase agreement conditioned on several factors. The sale hasn't commenced nor is it final yet, but they're very interested and have given some proposals for this. So what they've given is the concept plan. What we'd like to do is present that in general tonight, just to get anybody's comments so we can pass it along. There will be a little discussion of this. The concept plan will be presented to City Council on Monday, and then we'll go from there with what the next step on this is. The review of a concept plan is to provide feedback to the developer from the staff, commissions, and authorities and City Council. So what they're looking for are comments on this as to what we think of the plan, what we would like to see, anything that we think that they've not touched on. These are just kind of general concepts now. The details are to follow. The concept plan is essentially just a comment period. So we're trying to touch base with everybody to get their comments, because this is a big development that will have a lot of impact on the city. And we want to make sure that we pass along to the proposed developers what these feelings of the city residents are. The major categories of the project are the major points of entrance will be the intersection of Sand Hill Crane and Viking Boulevard, which is already an existing entrance. The entrance to the golf course as it currently exists. The design of these intersections and the approval of their spacing will be determined by the Anoka County Highway Department. This plan would also be presented to MnDOT for their review. MnDOT probably would not have a lot to say, except what maybe its future potential could be on this existing intersection at Viking Boulevard. There's also a potential entrance point down here at 187th Lane, which would go up Sand Hill Parkway. There's an existing road that comes in from the west side or the east side of the proposal. 189th Avenue, it's currently an unpaved road. It has a intersection with a very bad sight line. What we would recommend on this is that road not be a primary entrance. It would only be used for emergency service vehicles and would be totally restricted through traffic. As part of the proposal too, they don't show it on this plan, but we're going to request that they show another potential street going south somewhere along this point right here to access Sand Hill Parkway again, or to go down to Briarwood. All the streets and cul-de-sacs along with utilities will be constructed in compliance with City Code Section 66-164, which requires that streets shall provide future connections to adjoining unsubdivided land. That would essentially be another requirement of this street right here. The plan consists of a neighborhood of 350 new single-family homes in 2 lot sizes with a combination of single-level, multi-level, or 2-story floor plans. This is their concept that they presented. There are some internal streets, which are basically cul-de-sacs, which aren't shown on this plan. This just shows the overall proposal for the 2 types of homes that they're proposing, along with the open space, the walking trails. They would have a city park within this that they would develop and pay for. City services, the majority of the development is within the metropolitan urban service area. The single-family homes would be connected to the city water and sewer system within this section of the development. Met Council has confirmed that a metropolitan utility service area boundary adjustment would require an amendment to the city's comp plan to extend utility service to the parcel outside of this area, this is the 30-acre portion that's currently zoned rural residential. This is the boundary of the MUSA, which goes 3/4 of a mile from Highway 65 east and west of the highway. So this has a low-density designation, and for it to be serviced would require a comp plan amendment before this could be extended with utilities. The plan proposes a density of 3.04 dwelling units per acre, which is in the comprehensive plan density range and the target average of 3 dwelling units per acre in the municipal utility service area. An environmental assessment worksheet will be required. It includes, but not limited to, a detailed evaluation of land use, natural resources, water use, geological features, traffic, air emissions, historical or archaeological resources, and impact on infrastructure. And the traffic portion would include a traffic study to determine the impact on the county roads and the city street that this project would access. At their June 27th, 2023 meeting, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on the concept proposal, and 10 residents presented their concerns with the projects. Their comments primarily focused on potential impacts relating to rural feel and character of the city and the increased housing density that this project would provide, and potential traffic concerns at the Viking Boulevard internal street intersections and on 189th Avenue and its intersection with Greenbrook Drive. City Council will review and offer comments on the plan at their July 24th meeting, and the concept plan will be placed on the Parks Commission August 8th meeting for their review and comment. This plan would generate an estimated $389,000 in annual city property tax revenues at build out in 2029. This estimate is based on an average of $350,000 for the estimated market value of each of the 350 units, with a tax classification rate of 0.01 and using the 2023 city tax rate of 31.76%. This estimate does not take into account any appreciation in market value of the homes through the projected 5-year build-out of the project. The city will also collect $1,960,000 in city SAC and WAC fees over the life of the project, which is projected to be 2024 through 2029. This amount would pay off the majority of the Met Council Reserve Capacity loan. In addition, the increased housing units would provide the demographics and income in the local market area, which are needed to attract basic retail, food, and grocery services to the city. Staff is requesting the EDA to discuss the proposed concept plan and provide any comment to City Council on this proposal. So I'll go through these slides real quick. There's a couple more on here that we'll show. But this is the basic layout, which shows in the front there'll be a section which they call their Liberty Homes, which will be on their smaller lots. This area labeled Classic Home will be on what they call larger lots, which are small lots in East Bethel. This will be where the multi-level and 2-story layouts are. These units here are going to be in the neighborhood, they say smaller homes, but they're going to be 1,700 to 2,800 square feet. All of this area, in this area, will be served by city water and sewer. This area back here is yet to be determined. This is the current zoning of the area. This area right here is in the mixed use, which allows high density. The higher density classifications in here could be from 12 to 30 units per acre, but they're only proposing about 3 units. This area is R1, which could be a higher density. It'll be lower than what the highest density allowed, and that is. And this is the segment that's zoned rural residential, which is currently outside the service area boundary of what we can do to extend utilities unless we modify the comp plan. So overall, the densities that are proposed in here are lower than what the zoning regulations do allow. So it's going to be broken up too by this open space, which includes a lot of ponding, which they'll use for kind of borrow pits, existing wetlands, and buffering areas. So there'll be about 45 acres in here, which kind of splits and breaks some of these areas up here and makes it look like, at least on the plan, that there's some separation between some of these housing blocks so that they don't all appear to be back to back to back to back.
And you're just looking for our overall comments?
Yeah, we're just looking for comments, and so they can be presented to city council, so they'll get a feel from a wide variety of people that looked at the plan.
So, for the council members here and mayor, so I'm kind of interested to see what the traffic study is gonna show. I think that's my main thing when it comes up. So if something's approved, is it contingent on the EAW passing and the traffic study? I'm not sure how that process works.
I believe that those factors would have to be presented to us.
Okay,
But it's also kind of a catch-22 where they have to develop a preliminary plat first.
right,
And
okay.
that costs a significant amount of money.
And most areas of the traffic study will come and indicate, like for these two intersections here, particularly this one is nearly finished. The city does have to install a bypass lane on this one by 2025. But the Anoka County Highway Department will dictate what the design is on that. That design will be influenced by what the traffic study
Okay,
says.
okay.
And they'll also have some comments for this southern section down here. And I think when MnDOT sees this, what they're gonna recommend is, at some point, the solution to this is going to be to continue this service road down south, and hopefully Ham Lake will connect their crosstown to 181st Avenue, which would give two signalized intersections north and south for traffic to exit on at some point in the future. The traffic study is very important, and with the way this is going to be built out, it's going to be built out in a 5-year plan, and so it's going to be kind of incremental, but in the end it'll be cumulative, and I think the Anoka County Highway Department is going to have one of the bigger determinations in what has to be done to accommodate this traffic and how it's handled.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts from anyone?
My thought is just that this on top of the development that has already started with Elevage and the 200 or so, 221 something townhome units, to add this to that, I can't imagine that level of traffic being accommodated within that spectrum.
All of a sudden.
Yeah, like where would they go? I mean, there's nothing here that, there aren't that many extra roads or anything. Where would they go?
Traffic circles I see coming.
Well, and again, that will be determined by the traffic study. The traffic study will make projections on what they anticipate the volume will be, how it'll break out in terms of daily trip averages and times and frequencies of peak loads. I looked at over on the west side of Highway 65 where Jackson Street empties in, and there's probably around 300 homes in there that empty onto Jackson Street. We don't seem to have a problem there, but maybe this is more concentrated, and it's really hard to comment on, you know, is there a terrible impact, or is it going to be one that's manageable until we see the results of the study? So I think that's the critical thing that we have to wait and see. And if there are huge impacts, then the developer will be required to address those, and it'll be up to them to decide whether they want to proceed with the project.
I'm intentionally staying as quiet as possible tonight because I read the minutes and I talked too much last time. And besides, this is a year gathering. You know, I'm more of an observer. I can blab plenty at a city council meeting.
You know, in
But
reading.
what you're raising is a very, very important point, and it's what's key for me, and it's why I voted against Elevage twice, is because that was the most ridiculous traffic study I ever saw in my life. They didn't take into account the impact on Crosstown, on Viking. It was just all about 187th, and I looked at it, well, this isn't a real traffic study. And I'm going to be paying very close attention to the traffic study on this one, because I don't sit up night reading our comprehensive plan as much as I should. But it's my understanding of the comprehensive planning and this whole Met Council stuff is if a project is going to get ahead of the road's abilities to handle it, that you're not bound by the zoning that you had put there if it's going to be that destructive. And that's my fundamental, like I said, it's fundamental, but just throw that out there. But I think your point is very, very well taken.
Well, the concern was too, when they started mapping this out, you know, most of us moved here for the rural presentation of the area. And so Elevage, knowing that's gonna add 200 some townhome units, and then to have this right on top of it, and they talked about these properties being like 0.3 something an acre, and nothing out here is designed like that. I mean, most of our homes are on acreage. They're on, I mean, my home's on 2 acres. And I just find it a little hard to believe. I know it's happening all over in Blaine, and there are all these homes right on top of each other, but it looks like a lot of them are unsold. And I don't know, I'm curious as to how they would fit 350 homes in this space too. And this is right on top of my house where we're not, you know, on top of each other. It just, I don't know, it makes you wonder about I just think it does something to mess with the rural quality of our city that isn't a positive.
Well, and I think the point of keeping the rural nature where it's zoned that way, but our commercial corridor was zoned that way for a reason. So, I mean, this actually fits within
That
the
zoning.
comp plan, but we just really need to be mindful about the traffic.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, it's not an Iron Maiden you're locked into, you know, it's a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And it, just to be clear about it, I live in the far southeast corner of East Bethel. This isn't gonna have any impact on me at all. But I don't assume that I'm representing myself on the city council or on ADA or whatever, it's everybody. And you heard the reactions at the planning commission, public forum, and for the people who live nearby it, they're not too keen on the idea at all. And it's just because it's so inconsistent with their properties where, you know, they're 20 acres or 15 acres or whatever, you know.
So I have a question. First, I want to say that golf course is so beautiful, and I think this is going to just take away the whole beauty of that whole area. But why is a golf course turned into a mixed use anyways? I don't know. I could see where Elevage is, you know, up right along Sand Hill, but the rest of it, where the golf course actually is, I would think that whole area should be R1 or RR. I'm just not getting why
Well,
they zoned that mixed use, the golf course area.
It's because it's within the 3/4 mile highway corridor.
And and probably the other thought was it's at a major intersection that has higher development potential than other places in the city, but again, I can't speak to what the final decision was. That was originally zoned city center, which was something that was not practical. So when the latest comp plan was done, that was changed to mixed use, but it kept the same zoning requirements within the ordinance.
Can I ask you a question, Jack? As far as the mechanics of the deal, is this a signed purchase agreement or has a deal been executed?
It's a signed purchase agreement. It's depending on.
So it depends on.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
One question I have is that rural residential area in which we need to make an extension for city sewer and water, because you have fewer homes in that area, does that make fiscal sense for the developer?
Well, you couldn't extend sewer and water over into this section unless you did that comp plan amendment, which would allow that higher density. It wouldn't make.
But I'm talking about from the developer's point of view.
No, from the developer's point of view, that 2 acre lots is not.
Doesn't
feasible
make
to
economic
extend
sense.
That's
water
what
and
I'm
sewer.
thinking.
Yeah, it doesn't make economic sense. You know, I'm struck by a conversation I had when I first got involved with the city many years ago. I called a friend of mine, social friend of mine. He was on the city council at the time. I complained about the fact that, I don't know exactly what the neighborhood's called. You know what I'm talking about, Jack. If you go across, you go across the highway on 74 and you go, I live in Quincy, you go past that big subdevelopment all into the north. When I moved here, that was all farm fields. I could walk a young bird dog down the pine rows that went there and get him into all sorts of pheasants and some cattail swamps and that. And I called this gentleman up and I said, what the hell are we doing? You're taking my dog training grounds away from me. And his comment was, Brian, you should have bought it. And you know what? He's right. I should have bought it because it would have made a lot of money on it. But at the time, I couldn't have afforded the taxes on that parcel. So to a certain degree, that has always kind of hung with me in the whole time. East Bethel isn't rural anymore. It certainly isn't where you live, Kevin. That's about a high a density as you can have.
Well, yeah, that's the Coon Lake Beach
I
area.
I understand that.
That's been built up since the 20s and 30s.
Exactly.
Thanks to the Star Tribune. Yeah.
Yeah, buy a subscription to the paper and
And you get a lot.
you get a
yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
I am not a big pro residential, turn it into Ham Lake type of guy. Ham Lake, what are they allowing now, like acre and a half, or half acre lots, I believe?
1 acre.
1 acre.
It's not gonna be 1 acre lots.
The other thing is, I mean, it's kind of like when you have a farmer or a family that has farmed out here for all these years on this ground that can't produce, I mean, it couldn't produce 80 bushels an acre corn for, and they're struggling milking some cows and things like that. And now when they get a chance to cash out, you're not gonna let them, you're gonna say, no, you can't do it. It just seems like to a certain degree, it seems like a taking of property rights to me. I think there's a lot of opposition to this. The traffic study, I fully agree with you, Kevin. That's going to be very, very interesting.
And it has to be done properly.
Yep. I don't think it's going to have any impact on Highway 65, per se.
You don't think this as proposed?
I'll tell you what, when drive through Isanti, drive through Cambridge, the amount of houses and high density housing that's getting blown in there, and they're growing like crazy up there. Those cars all come down south. How do you?
I would love to believe that you're right. I would love that. If it had no impact, that would be great.
Well, and I think that when you look at the long-range plan that they had for the improvement of Highway 65, the state is essentially they're gonna attempt to turn it into a high-speed boulevard, for lack of a better term. They're trying to
off ramps and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll be long dead by the time that happens, but
I don't know. They're talking pretty aggressively down in Blaine, and Blaine is where they really have the
Yeah.
problem.
then
Blaine,
it just moves up here. Yeah.
Blaine just recently got full funding, I believe, to do their whole Highway 65 project. And that's, I think, anticipated to finish by 2030, somewhere right abouts there. So,
I see a lot of challenges here. I also see a lot of rooftops, and for the people that want to have a grocery store, this is the kind of thing that brings in a grocery store. So,
I have a question. Is this going to be a HOA also, as Elevage is?
I think they said there would be a minimal HOA on this, but they'll have to answer that question again. But I think they mentioned that there would be a minimal HOA fee.
I think I've attended every meeting on this just out of curiosity, and yeah, they said it was gonna be a very low-profile HOA insofar as the fact that covering signs and things like that, but they weren't, the single-family homes cut their own grass.
Just more design standard
It-
and upkeep.
It was
and-
more for the open space upkeep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, my only last comment is for all the people who say, oh, it's going to be a share of the tax burden. If you look at any other developing city, their taxes don't go down, they keep going up no matter how developed they get. So it's not going to help our taxes any. In fact, it will probably hurt because the houses in the development up off of Tippecanoe there are supposed to be $600,000 houses according to Zillow. And I'm like, that means my taxes are going to go up because your house is based on the properties around you. And so, yeah, it's not going to help.
Well, here's the way it will help, and you are correct, is development does not guarantee that taxes will go down. And very rarely does it ever make them go down unless you have somebody like Google or Microsoft move in here. Would change the whole complexion of it. But what it does, it spreads the tax burden out further and probably keeps yours from going up as fast as it would if you didn't have development. But to say it makes taxes go down, I agree, there's no guarantee of that happening.
I have nothing else.
Any other input?
Just a question, when would we expect to have further information about if they're moving ahead, what they would move ahead with, or?
Like I say, they're going to present this to the city council on the 24th, and if they get positive review of the concept plan, then they will start their process for going through this environmental assessment. And then the next step would be their preliminary plat. They said if they're going through with this, they would like to be moving moving earth by sometime in probably February of 2024. So probably the next thing that would come up as far as an approval thing would be a presentation to council sometime in September or early October on the EAW, the environmental impact of it, along with the traffic study. And then with blessings from that, they would go ahead with the preparation of the preliminary plat.
All right. Well, I think our comments have been recorded. And we'll watch for the city meeting. All right. With that, we'll move on to item number 6, business activity report.
The Holiday Station project at the intersection of 187th Lane, Highway 65, is still on schedule. They did have a completion date of the end of this month. They may be a week or two late, but they're in the short rows of their project now. The Elvidge project is still on schedule. They began clearing and grubbing last week. They started some on the northern portion of the site and the back portion of the property. They hope to have site grading and streets and utility installation will follow the clearing and grubbing, and they hope to have the first phase of the housing component ready to start by late fall or early winter. Quick strip construction began on June 1st, and they've completed their site work and fuel tank installation. They still say they're on completion for a project date of November the 9th, 2023. I did notice they had a booth at Booster Days that they were seeking applications for employment, and it seemed to be one that was fairly well visited. The City Council approved the conduit bond financing for Nexus at their July 10th, 2026 meeting. As a condition of their approval, a payment in lieu of taxes agreement and an amended CUP need approval. These items are proposed to be presented to City Council at a special meeting on August 7th, 2023, and the closing of the sale to Nexus is scheduled for August the 15th, pending approvals of these two items. As I reported before, staff has attended the chamber meetings to brief the chamber on the VR&E programs, and we'll continue to work with them to solicit and elicit their participation in the update of the program. Designing Earth Contracting, which we have discussed here before the meeting, has received all of their approvals of application for the project, and city staff is awaiting final engineering submission forms from the applicant. As soon as these are received, building permit applications will be reviewed, and construction is proposed to begin in August of 2023. Other items, city staff has received Met Council's comments on the Stone Group's proposal for their outlot at 209th Avenue and Johnson Street. Their interpretation of density requirements for properties that are not in the MUSA area or approved for the MUSA area only permit less than one unit per 10 acres for those areas not served by city service. So the Stone Group, this is where Dollar General is. We approved that frontage subdivision for commercial. They're looking to get approval for the back, I believe it's about 16 acres on the north side of Johnson Street for residential use. But because that's not served by water and sewer and it's in the MUSA area, the zoning density is 1 unit in 10. So Met Council says that's what they can do with that. So they had proposed to put 5 lots back there, but apparently that's not going to be acceptable at this point. The open application for a mining permit and site preparation for proposed greenhouse garden center project north of 209th Avenue on Highway 65 is awaiting submission for approval pending direction by the property owner. The Strandland Meets and Bounds subdivision at 2836 221st Avenue was approved at the July 10th City Council meeting, and a concept plan for the rural subdivision of the remaining acreage of this state has been received and will be presented to the Planning Commission at their July 25th, 2023 meeting. The concept plan application has been received from Hidden Prairie, which is formerly Hidden Pines. The reason this name was changed is the developer found out that there was another development in Anoka County called Hidden Pines, so he had to revise his name. This request will be presented to the Planning Commission at their July 25th, 2023 meeting. And city staff has begun research into an expansion request from Cedarwood Estates, formerly Village Green North. The request is to add 43 units onto lands within the existing development. At a minimum, this project would need a CUP. Apparently, there's no CUP on record. There was a thing called a special permit issued, but it was very vague in what its requirements were. It would also need approval of council of the legal non-conforming use to expand within the boundaries of their site. It would have to be approved by the MPCA for additional discharge of the expansion to their treatment facility, or an agreement to connect to the city system. So this has been discussed at the council level. Council has said, we need to see what the issue is with the CUP is first before we can proceed with it. So staff has done some extensive research going back to going back to probably the 1950s when we became a village, checking the records, but there is nothing on record that we can find that a CUP was ever issued for this project. So does anybody have any questions on the activities?
How long has Village Green, or now Cedarwood, actually been there? When did it start?
It's been there pre-1970s. It was actually owned by two other groups before it became Village Green North. I'll have to look those up to see. Aaron's done the research on it. But it's been there for over 50 years. And it's quite the interesting history. And we didn't realize it went back that far. We thought it was built in the early 70s, but it actually goes back to the 60s and maybe the late 50s.
Brian, I was gonna say, ask your grandparents.
They probably know, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I mean, when I moved here, I don't know, it was 40-some years ago. It was,
Yep, yep. My grandmother still remembers Hunter's Inn as Lone Tree, or Lone Oak. Lone Oak Bar, and they went dancing there back in the day.
and to me, it was Phil Heck's joint.
Yeah, so.
Any other questions?
So this Cedarwood Estates, it's off of what road? Is that the north one or
No, it's the south one.
It's
the one
the
at
south one.
181st and Bike.
over by Acapulco?
Yes.
I don't know where they have room for this 43 units, but
Actually, within that, they own like a 3 or 4 acre parcel that it currently has a house in combination, I think, 2 apartments in it. And then on the north side, they own about another 1.5 acres, 2 acres, which is currently a playground. It's kind of there's a piece of playground equipment and they mow it. So that's where the expansion would be.
I see, okay.
So, and that throws another wrench into it where they're expanding onto their own property, not another parcel.
All these properties are within the boundary of what they own, so that's why we're having to do some legal stuff on this to find if it's permissible to allow them to expand within property they own. If there was a CUP, it would have defined probably what those were, but since there isn't, we're having to do a little bit more digging and get a legal opinion on this.
Okay.
All right, if nothing else, we'll move on to the city council report.
Thank you, Julie. I have a couple things. We passed a couple things that we've been working on for a while. The big one being the conduit bond that Jack already talked about, and we officially hired Aaron Berg as our official community development director position. We dropped the interim off his title. I think that will be very beneficial for the city. He is a very smart, very hardworking individual, and I think he would like to stay here for a while. Another item, we started talking about the city budget at our work meeting. I believe we'll probably be talking about the city budget over our next 2 or 3 work meetings to get everything flushed out on it, to get where we like. Of course, we had Booster Day this weekend. I think it was really well received and well attended, and it was a different format a bit where it was condensed all onto the east side of the booster, except for the fireworks, of course, and I think that worked out pretty well. I think also some lessons were learned that will make next year's Booster Day even more better. And I just had a question. On our last meeting, we brought up possibly doing a website revision. When would we like to pencil that in? Is this something that we would like to kind of put out because we have the BRNE, which is a big thing coming up, and if we want to put it off until we finish that, if any results that we get from the BRNE would lead to changes on the website, if we should put off revisioning the website until we have that done. But at the very least, I just bring it up. We could talk about the next meeting, but I just wanted to very briefly bring it up so that we can pencil it in so we don't forget to do it or it doesn't get covered up by
Right,
other
right.
paperwork.
That's a good point.
Relative to your question, Brian, I reached out to Civic Plus to discuss not that matter, but the communications issues policy that we've discussed. Kind of been playing telephone tag with the person that's supposed to help us. But in the last message that I got from them on Friday was that they had some ideas on how to better use the website to achieve some of our communication means, and that they will be giving us some references to on some consultants that may be able to help us in improving our efforts to communicate with our residents. So maybe I'll have a report, an update on that at the next meeting, and we can discuss that. See if we want to try to integrate everything into the schedule.
Okay, yeah. So just.
Do we have a read on when the next East Bethel Bulletin is coming out? It's,
I will have to check with Carrie on what that date is, Kevin. I can let you
Yeah.
know on Thursday.
okay.
It's usually, is it late August? Because usually with, you're signing up to be a candidate, you have to get your profile turned in within a couple days in order to make it into the bulletin. So I would say late August, September that it comes out. The
Yeah,
next issue
well, it was
will be.
supposed to be out about 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago, according to Carrie, last time I talked to her, before the last time.
There were some issues with the printer, but
And it was related to the same, at least what Carrie told me, is Civic Plus acquired the people who do the printing on the East Bethel Bulletin or composition or whatever, is how I understood it anyway, and that was slowing them down. So if you're talking to them anyway, maybe they can shed some insight on that.
and I'll get up with you as soon as I hear something
Yeah,
next week.
yeah.
Give you an update.
So, those are my questions. Kevin, do you have anything else to add?
Nope, you did a great job.
Thank you.
I have a question. Night to Unite's almost here, and I'm just wondering if that's going to be published on the website at all, or if there's going to be advertising of who's sponsoring them or anything like that.
It will be as soon as we get the information. We haven't received the information as to the locations yet. As soon as we get that from the county, that'll be published immediately.
Okay, thank you.
That's August 1st, isn't it?
It's usually the first week in August.
Yeah,
First Tuesday.
Tuesday?
okay. Okay.
That is the first.
Good points. Yeah, I'd love to keep that conversation going about the website and the bulletin, just figuring out get that on a regular basis. Anything else?
That's all I got.
All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.